I've got a slideshow presentation that I will go through here tonight. One of the things I would like to point out for those of you with the color brochure, first and foremost, everybody wants to know how much is it going to hurt me. So on the bottom of this first page, it talks about the referendum. And the school board has made a commitment to only taking a levy amount that's needed to balance the budget. So in our presentation, we're anticipating that being potentially $700,000 for next year. So with that $700,000 would have an impact of $62 on a $100,000 home. So if you have a $300,000 house, it's $186. That's $15.51 a month is what that impact would be. The other thing that I want to try to make perfectly clear right now is that the language is for a recurring referendum, but it's a one-time dollar ask. It's one time, $1.3 million. It's not $1.3 million every year. It's only one time that we're asking for the $1.3 million. And when I said the board was committed to only levying what we need to balance the budget, we'll be taking a smaller bite. That's why we're looking at maybe $700,000 next year. Then it would be a small bite the next year and the next year. So those numbers are on the bottom of that sheet. So that's why in the subsequent year, it would be, if it's a $300,000 house, it'll be $96. In the 26-27 fiscal year, $99. In the 27-28 and $105 when we would finally cap out at that $1.3 million.
And how long does that $1.3 million last?
It stays in our revenue limit authority forever. That stays with us. We think that 1.3 will get us at least 4 fiscal years, probably even more past this time period. Part of it depends on what happens in Madison. It's a new biennium budget coming. If they eliminate the $325 per pupil, we might need more money in each year, and then it'll have an impact as to how long that lasts. Okay? So we are one of the oldest publicly funded school districts in the state of Wisconsin. It's part of our mission statement, something that we can be very proud of, established in 1829. So there's a long, long history. Why an operating referendum? An operating referendum is not going to add on to the buildings. It's not going to finish any other projects that we have going on. It's purely to operate our school facilities. We need the money to pay teachers. We need the money to buy curriculum. We need the money to make sure that we can do the maintenance work on our buildings and keep things going. We want to maintain the academic offerings that we have right now. My motto as a superintendent, my motto as a principal is the same. I want our doors to be open for students. When they leave here, they don't have to look at going to a 4-year school. I want them to have the option to go to a 4-year school. If they want to go to a 2-year school or they want to go right into the job market, I want our students to have opportunities here that prepare them for any of those opportunities when they go through the door. We want to be able to retain and attract teachers, and that is one of the board priorities. A year ago they selected 3 priorities: retention and recruitment. They wanted to make sure that students and staff feel socially, emotionally supported, and then board governance. They want to be efficient in what they're doing. They want the school to operate efficiently. And being able to approve an operating referendum helps the board, helps us make that happen for our staff members. We want to stay current with our technology and maintenance. And another important thing is we want to make sure that we maintain a healthy fund balance. I'll kind of get to what that is in a little bit. So a lot of times people look at, you're going to referendum because you did something wrong. We mismanaged money. We didn't spend it the right way. And I would say if you look around the state, then every school district in the state of Wisconsin has mismanaged the money. That's not the case. We're not getting what we need to support. We're not getting the revenue limit authority. Back in 1993, the legislature came in and said, we're going to lock your revenue authority at this level. If you were a frugal school district, you were locked in at a low rate. If you spent money, if your district was spending money like you were printing it in the shop class, you were locked in at a much higher rate. So you were not impacted as drastically as schools that spent money wisely, that were a little bit more conservative. Then it talks about in 2009, it used to be that our revenue was tied to inflation. So if inflation went up 2%, our revenue limit, our support for Madison went up 2%, and it would go up 5%, it would go up 3%. And whatever that percentage was, it was tied to inflation until the 2009 school year. When Madison said, we can't continue to do that, we're going to have to just give you a specific dollar amount. So while inflation continued to go up, here was a dollar amount. And unfortunately, at times, that dollar amount might have been zero. We've had increasing costs, just like everybody at home. You know, the city put in some fixes to the water tower and everybody's water bills went up. Well, guess what? So did ours here in the district. Our water bill went up 18% from previous years. The cost for us to get food, you know, you go to the grocery store, it costs you more to get groceries to feed your family. It's also costing the district more money to make sure that we can provide breakfast and lunch. Putting fuel in the boilers to heat the school in the winter has gone up 7%. But we also, when we have our transportation contract, we pay for the gas that goes in the buses. It was a way to try to keep that contract down a little bit more. Maybe we have the benefit if gas prices come down a little bit, we save a little bit. Instead of the bus company coming in saying, we're just going to charge you X amount for fuel. And whether it goes up or down, we don't get any of that savings. Well, that fuel prices for busing, for our snow plows, for the vans that we use to get kids around places, that's gone up 7%. Our property casualty insurance, something we all have to have, has gone up 7%. Our health insurance last year went up 6.5%. And then the last piece is the ESSER money. ESSER money was the money we were given for the pandemic. Elementary and secondary school emergency relief is what ESSER stands for. And questions came up, why did you save that money? Well, every school district got 3 payments. And every one of those payments came with a deadline. You needed to spend the money by this date or the federal government would take that ESSER money back. This last round, ESSER's last check, round 3, September 30th is the deadline. If schools have not spent their ESSER money, anything that's been unspent goes back to the federal government. So there was no way for us to keep that money in a savings account without losing it.
What did we spend that ESSER money on?
We spent it on things that the federal government told us we had to spend it on. So trying to maintain our staff employment. So when we had to shut the schools down and teach remotely, we were paying our teachers and our support staff to help work with students online. We paid our maintenance staff to come in and clean and disinfect the building. We bought cleaning supplies. We bought the UV lights that we could roll into different rooms that would kill off any virus. We did those kinds of things. Some of the money was supposed to be used for the social and emotional well-being of our students. So as we came back, we hired a social worker. That was one of the expenses that we were directed to do. So we brought in a social worker who's done a phenomenal job for our students, and money went to that. We offset some of the other salaries wherever we could, but we tried to use it more on one-time expenses. More of the cleaning supplies, more on, hey, we need some curriculum to help our students, get caught back up again. Unfortunately, as I'll get to later in the presentation, we were finally told from Madison, you need to use that money to operate your buildings on continuing expenses, and that's a recipe for disaster. That, you know, that'd be like me writing a grant, getting a grant, and I'm going to hire 5 people that next year I don't have the money for because the grant runs out. But that's what we were told we should be doing. So I have a video. It's about 4 minutes long. I'll leave it up to the audience members. If you want to see it, it kind of explains a little bit about school funding. It's also on our website where we have frequently asked questions, and if you want to just watch it there on your own, you can certainly do that. So you want me to just skip to the next slide, or you want to watch it? Skip? Okay. It does a good example, it provides a good example of kind of how school funding is laid out. So where do we get our money from? If you think of it as a dollar, we get 48 cents from the state in the equalization aid. We get 32 cents from the local taxpayers. And then we get some grant monies, we get open enrollment monies, very little in the federal government. You know, the federal government provides maybe about 3% of the revenue for us when it comes to education. So that kind of shows where we're getting our money from. And it's not 50-50 as you look, it's never been 50-50, yes.
So if we pass this referendum, what does the local tax levy percentage change to? From 32% to what? Or does it not?
Part of that will depend on what each year the state comes in and says, here's what we assume, you know, assess the value of your property is. It will probably go up a little bit more than 32%. I don't have that number specifically, but again, it's here's this pot of money, and if we give you more in state aid, you have to collect less in property taxes. If we're giving you less in state aid, you can collect more in property taxes. This referendum gives us authority to get more money out of property taxes.
Mitch, I wonder, can I suggest that we do watch the video? Just as a baseline, given my question?
The previous slide. It's a good video.
Just because the question that was just asked is one of the most complicated funding formulas that there is, that exists. And I think it's hard to conceptualize what.
Our public schools are the cornerstone of our community. The education and opportunities we provide for students today shape their futures and ours. Schools, like any organization, need money to operate. But in Wisconsin, funding the needs of our schools has been a growing challenge. State policy limits how much school districts can spend. The vast majority of school funding comes from a combination of state dollars and local property taxes. It's called the revenue limit, and it acts as a cap per student that school districts can spend each year. Even if school costs go above this level, schools can't spend any more than this limit. From 1994 to 2009, these revenue caps were adjusted for inflation, which meant they helped schools keep up with ongoing needs. But since 2010, the resources districts need to survive have fallen farther and farther behind the basic costs to operate our schools. By the end of 2025, the revenue limit will have fallen more than $3,300 per student behind inflation. With a district of 1,000 students, that's a decrease of more than $3 million. What's more, each district has a different revenue cap, and these caps are not tied to the needs of the students or the cost to the schools that serve them. Our job as a school district is to make sure all of our students have access to the exceptional educational opportunities we provide, no matter what their needs when they walk through our doors. But state funding falls short of what it costs to meet the specific needs of many of our students. When that happens, we have to use money from our general fund to cover the difference, which means taking dollars from other important needs. The largest portion of our budget goes towards staffing. Our people are the heart of our schools. Without enough educators who instruct, support, and inspire learning, schools can't provide the lessons, programs, and opportunities our students deserve. Other important budget items include curriculum, technology, transportation, operations, and maintenance. School districts work hard to balance their budgets, yet resources for schools have been shrinking year after year since 2010. With costs growing so much faster than funding, districts are always looking for ways to trim costs and work smarter, like deferring needed school maintenance, cutting programs, reducing staff, and many other strategies. But schools can only cut so much before they start to harm educational opportunities for their students. To maintain class sizes, keep up with rising costs, take care of school buildings, and protect high-quality instruction, many districts have turned to their community to help fill the state-imposed funding gap. Since the arrival of revenue limits, over 80% of school districts have done so by asking local voters to raise their caps through an operating referendum. Most have used the option multiple times. Our children don't have time to wait for state policymakers to fix the school funding system. By putting the needs of our students first, we are investing in their potential and the future of our whole community. Strong schools make strong communities where families want to move and stay. Learn more about school finance in Wisconsin by visiting our websites.
So I think the cup example is like, when you think about taxes and revenue limits and all this complexity, just because the levels in the cup, the top of the cup doesn't get taller. And so sometimes it feels like you're giving more money to the school, but it might not actually come to the school district. It's just adjusting so that the cup doesn't get taller. It's a really bad way of describing it, but it's really complicated. I'm also realizing watching this video, I'm a school board member. We're in the weeds all the time trying to make sure we don't have to go to referendum. So I have a lot more context in my head, and now that I watch the video, I'm like, well, it doesn't explain all the things. Actually, I'm adding a lot of that, but it is really hard to get your head or my head around, for sure.
So if you look at what property taxes are doing and what percent that is of your personal income, if you go back to 1985, parents were spending about 2.5% of their personal income for property taxes. Now back in 1985, the average salary, the average income in a house in Wisconsin was about $23,000. So 2.5% of that's a big chunk of money coming out of there. It bumps up in 1993 to 2.8%. And the average income then was about just under $32,000, so not much growth, but that percentage creeps up. Now looking at it out in 2023, the percent is down to 1.5%. But obviously, a larger dollar amount, you need a smaller percent to give you more money. The average median salary for Wisconsinites, Wisconsin households is about $77,000 in 2023. But the percentage of the income that we're asking for has decreased over time. So this slide has a lot of information, and the first thing I want to point to is the numbers on the upper left-hand side, where it's 0, 0, 0, 0, 175, 179, 0, 0, 325, 325. That is the revenue limit authority that the state has given school districts. So when they uncoupled revenue limits to inflation, remember I said they gave you a single or a simple dollar amount? So in 4 straight school years, we got zero money, extra money out of max. The legislature provided less. And some people say, well, this is a math problem, and they're exactly right. It is a math problem. So the black line on the bottom shows the revenue limit authority that school districts have. It's been zero for 4 years. Then in the 2019-20 school year, we got a bump of $175 per pupil. The next year we get 179 per pupil. The green line represents the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. When I first came to the Middle Point School District, the salary structure was set up that we will pay you CPI if we can afford it. So we'll fully fund everybody at a CPI increase. Well, when inflation was 1.6%, 0.12%, it was pretty easy to give that CPI, that cost of inflation increase. We could find places to save some other money. Maybe we don't repair the roof this year, we'll repair it in another year. Maybe we don't purchase all of the computers we need this year, we'll buy them in batches and spread that cost out a little bit more. So when we got nothing, we could balance that budget. The years 2021, 21, 22, 21, 22, 23, everybody remember what was going on in that lovely time in our lives? The blue line indicates where school districts were told, use your ESSER money. We're not going to give you anything, so in 21, 22, 22, 23, we got 0 for revenue limit authority. Use your ESSER money. So that's some of the places where ESSER went. And inflation jumps 4.7% in that first year. The school district, as I said, uses CPI for their pay raises. They did not give a CPI pay raise. They cut back some of those costs and gave 3% instead of a 4.7% raise. Last year, that was 8%. And the school district gave a 4% pay raise and said, we want to see when we get halfway through the fiscal year, where are we? Are we in a good shape financially or not? When we got to that mid of the year, we were in good shape, so they gave an extra 2%. So last year, staff members got 6% instead of 8%. So again, there's a little bit of a cost savings in there. And the red indicates where a lot of districts had to use fund balance. The last year, this current year that we're in, CPI went up 4.12%. The school board had a lot of lengthy conversations around retaining people, keeping good teachers here, attracting good talent. They committed to giving the 4.12%. We are using fund balance to get through this school year. So we're presenting a budget that has a deficit for this current school year. We have the money there, we're going to spend it. But it kind of shows just how revenue limits impact what we're able to do as a district. So sometimes it's hard to figure out, okay, what does revenue limit mean? You know, I run a business, revenue limit. So here's my poor example. Go out to the burger stand and you want a value meal. You want the value basket. Well, if you go 10 years ago, that value basket might have cost you $5. And it comes with a burger, large fries, and a large drink. Well, as you move forward 10 years, minimum wage has gone up. The cost to heat your building, turn on your fryers, put the electricity in your building has gone up. And the cost to buy the food items to sell has gone up. So you come back 10 years now, and you look at what's that value basket going to cost me? Well, now, if I'm going to make some money off of this, I'm going to have to charge $12 for that value basket. But the revenue limits say you can't charge $12. You only get to charge $5. So what do? You're the business owner. You can only charge, because of revenue limits, $5. You might lay off a couple of your workers, you know, somebody that runs the basket to the customer, somebody that's running the fryer, maybe you're doing more, maybe you shut down the number of days you're working, or potentially, if you have to sell that value meal for $5, it becomes a bun and a drink. There is no hamburger, there's no fries, it's just, here's $5 worth of material and time, and that's what it is. And that's what a revenue limit would do to a local business such as this. And that's what revenue limits do to schools. I can't come in and say, look, it's going to cost me more money, so please, I'm just going to take the money from you and charge you more for it. That revenue limit locks us out of that opportunity. So I've talked about fund balance a couple of times. And everyone in here has a fund balance. Every one of us has fund balance. On payday, when you get your check from work, you have good cash flow. That's part of your fund balance. But your house is part of your fund balance, your car is part of your fund balance, your furniture is part of your fund balance. It's the assets that you own. So for a school, it's the building, it's our equipment, it's our tables, it's our trucks and lawnmowers. That's part of our fund balance, plus some cash. We need to make sure we have a board policy that says we need to maintain 15% fund balance. Using fund balance cash this year will still be about that 15%, but it won't last us forever. We'll drop below that without a successful referendum in another year. As it says at the bottom of the slide, without a referendum, it would be 14.25. Okay, it's just 0.75% below. But the board policy states 15%, and if it gets lower and lower, that impacts basically our rating as a school district. Financially, it causes some additional problems. When Marcia Jelen retired after 42 years, I cried like a little baby. I begged her to come back because she knew the finances of the school district. She had that history. I feel very, very fortunate. The two people that I have working in the business office now, they have found ways to make the district more efficient. We always ask, every year, we ask the local banks to provide us with a bid for a line of credit. Because when schools get their funding, we get it basically in 4 chunks. It used to be we'd get 15% of our money, our revenue, in the first payment, and 35% in the last payment. And the last payment always came in June after the school year is over, the kids are gone, I don't need the curriculum anymore. Now that at least made it even. So now it's 25% each time we get that revenue. But there's times in between. I get payroll I have to make, we have bills we have to pay. So the line of credit allowed us to go to the bank, borrow some money, make sure we can pay those bills, make sure the employees are getting their checks. And then when we get our revenue from the state, we pay off the loans, and we're paying interest out. Well, because of the 2 young gals that we have running in the business area right now, we never had to borrow money last year. Because we had a good fund balance, we did not have to pay any money in interest out. As a matter of fact, it helped us generate some additional revenue. So here's question number 2. Question number 1, what's it going to cost me? Question number 2, the referendum language is in the middle of the page. Okay? I'm always asked, why can't you make this simple language? Why can't it be, can I have 1.3 million, yes or no? I wish I could, because it would be easier to understand. But the language is legal. We have to send it out, we have to get it approved, the board passes a resolution authorizing this language. So basically it's saying, shall the Mineral Point Unified School District, Iowa and Lafayette Counties, Wisconsin, be authorized to exceed the revenue limit specified in section 121.91 Wisconsin state statutes by $1,300,000 for the 25-26 school year, and thereafter for recurring purposes consisting of ongoing operational expenses. The reason it's a recurring referendum is you're giving us this revenue limit authority, and it stays with the school. It recurs throughout the year. It's not asking for 1.3 million next year, and 1.3 million again, and 1.3 million again, and again, and again. It's a one-time ask for $1,300,000. Part of the problem comes for us, I think, is there are school districts around us that are asking for a non-recurring referendum. The school district to the north is asking for $2.99 million a year for 4 years. So that means next year they're going to tax their taxpayers $2.99 million. Then that money goes away. And then they're going to do it again the next year for $2.99 million. And then it goes away. And they do it again and again. Dodgeville is going for a 4-year, so basically it's a $12 million referendum. And at the end of the 4th year, that revenue disappears again. So they will have to go back and ask for another referendum when they get to year 4 and they know that that money is going to be gone.
So what do we do in year 4 when our money is gone? Even though it's only the 200,000 that last year, what is our plan for year 4?
Our plan for year 4 is that we believe through our staffing, and we made certain assumptions. We have a representative from Baird Financial here with us. You know, if you have specific questions, he can answer. But we believe we'll be in a good enough financial situation that referendum dollars will carry us actually past that 4th year. I believe we will get to year 5 and 6 and potentially even 7 before we would have to ask for any additional funding. Now, there are some assumptions that go with that Madison doesn't take away the $325 per pupil. That might mean that window shrinks a little bit, but if that number stays with us for a while, we potentially could see this 1.3 million stretch out. So I said earlier on the bottom of the colored sheet where there's 4 different numbers, how it will impact your taxes. That's what the bottom portion of this slide is talking about. The school board has said multiple times, our intention is to only levy what we need to balance the budget. So we look at, okay, we're 500,000 in the hole this year. We need another 200, so 5 and 2 is 7. So we're looking at potentially levying 700,000 next year. The next year, we would only levy 150. Again, based on our assumptions that property values are going to increase at a specific rate, we'll continue to get the $325 per pupil. So then there'll be a small bump in year 2, a small bump in year 3, and a small bump in year 4. And when we get to that year 4, right now that's when we would hit that $1.3 million. So again, please, if somebody asks you, we are not asking for $1,300,000 every year. It's a one-time dollar ask that cannot exceed that.
Mitch, I think it's also important to add that hopefully the state gives us more money so that 1.3 lasts even longer. So
Right. And I'll have another slide that I can speak to it as well. There's talk that right now we get about 33 cents on the dollar reimbursement for educating our special needs students, or students with special needs is how I should say it. That's what they really are, our students that have special needs. There's talk that maybe that goes to 50 cents. Well, right now we transfer $1.2 million out of our general fund into what's called Fund 27, our special education fund. If we get 50 cents on the dollar, I don't have to transfer $1.2 million. That pushes that referendum dollar farther down the road. That gives us more time. If they come from $325 to $350 per pupil, that will push that money further down and buy us more time down the road.
So how much more time if we look at that to say, if it's not 33%, it's 50%, how many more years does that give us with this 1.3? Have we looked at that? Have we looked at those numbers to see what that is?
Some of the projections are hard to do financially. Just like, I give you kind of a projection of what the mill rate is going to be. The more property value we have, that forces the mill rate to come down. It's still getting the same dollar amount, but your house, you didn't do anything to your house, but somebody comes in and says, hey, your house is worth $250,000 this year. You've done absolutely nothing to it. Next year, your house is worth $300,000. That will help drive that mill rate down a little bit more. So the more property value we have, the more property rich we are, the lower that mill rate goes. And Marquez, you want to answer that a little bit?
Sure. I would also add, imagine if we were doing this in 2019, right before the pandemic, and we had made 4-year projections and been talking about this is what it's going to look like in 4 years. We would not have predicted inflation like that happened. We would not have predicted the ESSER money. We wouldn't have predicted the $0 revenue limits increases. There's a lot of variables at play, so it's hard to project out. I would say 2, 3, 4 years is about as far as you really realistically have a chance of being somewhat accurate. But what this does is it buys you more time, and you can see what the state does with revenue funding over the next couple of years. You can see how this impacts your state aid and your other factors, and then at that point, you would come back to the community if needed, or like Mitch was saying, I think this puts the district in a good position that even by that final year, you still don't have to do something immediately, barring any other drastic changes, economic changes. State or
so then who do we as taxpayers push on to get that 33% pushed to 50%?
I would say your elected representatives out
But
in
I
this
think
area.
that message needs to be put out, because then that helps everybody.
Absolutely. And that was, the governor had tried that in this last biennium. The superintendent of state schools, Jill Underly, Dr. Jill Underly, tried to get that in. There's some distrust or mistrust that if we get more money for special education, everybody's going to be special ed when they come. Hey, congratulations, today you have ADHD, and today you have dyslexia, and today you have, and that's not the case, because it is very difficult to have a student be qualified for needing special education services. But yes, talk to your representatives, our state senator, our state representative in this area, and say, hey, I support this, because that increase benefits every student in the building, every taxpayer in the district gets that benefit.
I think a lot of us in this room probably have emailed, our representatives, and often get the same canned response. I would say a lot of the pressure needs to come from groups of people that are involved in education, school boards en masse across Wisconsin, CISAs across Wisconsin. They also need to put pressure on everybody, the governor still, and everybody. I've sent many emails over the last 4 or 5 years, and it's the same, hey, we recognize this is a problem, yada, 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 and they still get elected. And I think we all know the same 2 people that keep getting elected and elected and elected, and will probably get elected in November again.
Dr. Dutton?
Yeah, just a couple things. We've invited Senator Marconi to our school board meetings multiple times, and he hasn't appeared yet. I know he's going to make this year, but he has responded to my emails when maybe email him or his assistant has. The other thing is that every school board is a member of the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, and when we attend that state convention in January, we have a delegate from every school board that meets and goes over different resolutions, which are basically like, these are the changes we'd like to see in public education from, you name it, curricular requirements. These are things we'd like to see in the state statutes. And then OSB has a lobbying arm that takes those resolutions to the state legislature and say, this is what our school boards in mass want to see changed. So there is that happening politically, but you're right, it feels like
Well, yeah, sometimes you just know that's
it's
not
hard. And there's competing interests too, obviously.
I get the same emails you get. I'm just a whiny public school administrator begging for more money. It is how I read them. They don't say that, but that's how I read them. But we continue to reach out and say, you please support us. Here's another way of looking at how a recurring revenue limit, or how a recurring revenue referendum, plays out. So next year, the 25-26 school year, we're anticipating that our revenue limit, our base revenue, will be $12,086,000. If the referendum is successful in November, we look at levying $700,000. So now you notice that the gray box gets a little bit bigger in the next year. That's because The recurring language allows us to keep that 700,000 in our revenue limit. So then in year 2, we look at potentially needing 150,000. And then the next year, it's 175. So it only adds up to the 1.3 million. But that recurring allows us to keep that in that revenue limit, in that base revenue. Unlike a non-recurring where we give it back every year and have to ask again, and give it back and ask again. So here's, again, you have this on the bottom of that colored page, what we're anticipating the mill rates to do, the impact on taxes. So that first year with that $700,000 ask, on a $100,000 house, it's $62. As I said, if it's a $300,000 house, you're talking about $15.51 a month. In the subsequent years, if the mill rates come in at those same levels we're projecting, you're talking about less than $10 a month as an impact to the taxpayer.
Per 100,000.
Well, if it's less than $10, that'd be on a $300,000 house.
So on that slide, is it $62, and then the next year is it 62 plus the 32, and then the next year 62, 32, and 33?
The recurring, you've given me the 62. So that's not going away. So the next year it's $32 on top of that.
So it should be represented in a different way.
It's $162 on a $100,000 house to get to the 1.3 million, based on our projections.
So year 2 then, the 26 to 27, I'm just trying to follow what Mike is saying. It's not really 32, it's 94.
Based on this current year, right?
So the incremental increase year over year is 62 and then 32. But if you want to say what is going to be the difference from my 2024 tax bill to my 2028 tax bill, you would have to aggregate that.
That would be the 162.
So it's a little under $500 in 4 years and $300,000 house.
Yep.
Would be correct?
Yep.
What's the average value of a house in Interpoint? Do we know that? What is the average?
Here's my realtor. 220. Okay.
I just feel like those are important things because too, we need to look at as a community, increasing our tax base. You know, we can't shut down every apartment building that comes into Interpoint. We can't shut down outsiders that come into Interpoint. We can't do that because
Correct.
we need more tax dollars in the community and that's going to help this situation as well.
For sure. Back in 2018, when we went for the building referendum, and that was an operational referendum of 350,000, that was a recurring referendum, I had that same conversation. Smart growth. Can we have some smart growth? If we have a place where we can put a couple of businesses, that brings down the property tax burden on everybody. If we add a housing development, that brings down the property tax burden. You know, and I keep preaching that because that's what we need. We need to have some smart growth.
That's what the school wants, but is that what the community wants?
Right. And there is a TID district now that's been laid out, and some of those are supposed to be houses and some small businesses that initially, I hate to say it this way, the school district will benefit if families move here and bring children.
Sure.
The taxpayers won't until the TID district becomes out of that district, and then it hits as a relief to everybody else.
Mitch, can you go back to that previous slide? Yeah. So I think the key, I think it is a key point that this is cumulative over time, right? So like Joni said, you know, the annual impact of 62 and 32 is that's going to be how your taxes are going to increase each year by that amount. And it is going to add, you know, it is going to be cumulative. And that's important because you see how the base revenue gets bigger. That means our cup is getting bigger. Remember the video with the cup where we can only spend this much. So with the recurring referendum, it allows the cup to grow and stay that big because obviously none of those recurring expenses to run the school are going to go away, right?
Right, and I think the people in this room are paying attention to that, but
Right.
the general public isn't paying attention to the fact that it's cumulative. And I feel like that's a little bit deceiving in in the slides that we're
Okay,
showing.
that's good feedback, because we can paint it.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, I'm just trying to say, I think that the average taxpayer is gonna look at this and say, oh, it's this much this year, it's this much next year. They're not realizing that it's gonna be cumulative.
True. I completely support that, and I'll do my best to try to explain it.
Yeah.
I could say we're gonna take the 1.3 million next year, and it's gonna be $162 increase, and then after that, it all depends on what the value of your property does, but that 162 stays. What the board was hoping would be more palatable is to take it in smaller bites. It's still gonna be that same dollar amount, but
Right.
the impact from one year to the next is much smaller than what that impact would be in year one. Mike, you had a question?
The math still doesn't add up. So if you go to the next screen. So if it's 62 this year, it's 32 next, so obviously that's 62 plus 32. But then the next year, 27 and 28, it would be 62 plus the 32 plus the 33. And then the next year after that, it would be the 62 plus the 32 plus the 33 plus the 35.
That's 162.
That is not 160.
You can't add 62 four times,
Why?
because you're only
It's
being
not
taxed
going up.
one time.
It's not
For the
going up
$62.
$90 in year two.
The next year, it's 32, so you add 32 to the 62.
Okay.
So from
From there, then what do you do?
from this current year to 2 years from now, your tax bill would be $94 more.
Okay. Then
From this
next
year
then.
to the third year, your tax bill would be 120.
127.
27. So I think what Mike is saying is that a slide that would be more understood by the general public would be 62, 94, 127, 162. It's probably a more accurate depiction of what actually happens, right?
I won't disagree with that until somebody reads it and says, so you're going to tax me $62 this year, next year you're going to tax me $94, the next year you're going to tax me $127, and the next year you're going to tax me $162, and the answer year over year is no.
Right.
It's not going to be that year over year.
Because I
going
feel
to
like
be-
we need to find a way to better
Right,
explain that.
and I can certainly try that, I can try to get that into the paper, I'll work with Mary to try to get something that helps clear that up a little bit. But the $1.3 million ask
For
would
sure.
have a $162 impact on taxes.
But one more question, I'll give you one.
Go ahead.
700 grand seems like a lot for 1 year to be under, and I'm curious, I spend a lot of time on the school property, and I do wonder about some efficiency things that we do around here.
Sure.
700,000 is a lot of money to be short 1 year. And I'm curious, did the district create any new positions this year? And if so, what were those positions and what were the reasons for doing that? Because you've obviously seen this.
Yep, we added 2 positions this year.
New positions.
2 brand new positions this year. One is a middle school reading interventionist. One of the things our students show us that we're struggling with on our state test scores is in the area of reading. And a math interventionist will allow us to drill down and get to specific areas that students need additional support in. And that's what this individual will be able to do for us, is work more one-on-one, more small group with some of our struggling readers to help build their skills and get them to be stronger readers. If you've probably seen Act 20 is the act that we all call, it's the Reading Act, where students have to be reading at a specific level. We saw this coming. We also saw this need, and that's why it was proposed that we add a reading interventionist at that level, at the middle school level. The second one,
At what cost? Salary and benefits, roughly. Not going to hold you to
I would say probably somewhere in that 85,000. And the other position, and the costs are going to be a little different here. The other position is a district-wide K-12 special education coordinator. We have some students with some pretty high needs that need a little more individualized attention. We have somebody on staff that was qualified for that position. We moved them there. So replacing that came at a lower cost. We got basically a brand new teacher, so we're probably talking more like $50,000 all in salaries, benefits.
plus whatever you gave extra to your staff that took the new job. They actually got raised.
Well, they got what everybody got. They got the 4.12%. But that was already in our budget. That was already figured in our budget. So we replaced that staff person with basically a brand new teacher.
Okay, and then, I was up here the other day and the air conditioners were out and you guys were installing and leaving the air conditioners on the roof. Did that come out of the ESSER money or is the ESSER money already spent?
The ESSER money's spent.
It's gone.
That came out of Fund 46, which is a capital maintenance fund. We had to establish that with a deposit in the checking account, so to speak, and then we couldn't use any of that money for the first 5 years. After year 5, we were able to start to spend some of that money on capital maintenance projects. Yep.
And we've been saving each year to get that up to almost $1 million.
Mitch, can I add one point?
Sure.
So the two positions we had, intermediate interventionist, so that was very much a data-driven decision. We as a school district have really, we've been a shining light in terms of our academics. Our test scores, as we look at them and kind of the direction they're headed, indicated that in order to continue on that path of excellence, we needed to do something in that space to ensure we were going to continue to be a school that exceeds expectations. And so that reading interventionist position is really supporting that educational view of our school. And then the special education position, as I'm sure you're aware, as a public school district, if we have students in our district who have special education needs, we are legally required to provide them Mitch, help me with the right words, a
Free and appropriate.
free and appropriate education. And so we are somewhat tied to those legal guidelines.
You know, just to be clear, I didn't ask that question because I opposed those decisions.
Oh, no,
I
I
was
just,
just curious how many new positions we have filled. That was just a question. It was not.
yeah, I just want you to know that we take this very seriously, that every position that comes before us, we're saying, is there a different way we could do this? Can we trim or squeeze or consolidate? And unfortunately, sometimes the answer is just no, we need another body.
So this is a snapshot of a portion of a spreadsheet that we use from Baird. We gave Baird Financial all of our past information, finances, revenues, expenses, how much our insurance has increased, all of these kinds of things. They put it in this wonderfully complicated spreadsheet that when a number is changed here, the formulas update everything all over the place. So with a successful referendum, you're looking at this current school year. I talked about being in a deficit. And you'll see on this slide and the next slide, it is a snapshot. That deficit's a little bit different. It's a different number. Part of that is when did we capture the data? If data is being updated, these numbers are changing throughout. But right now, when we looked at it here, that deficit was $532,000. So if we levy that $700,000 next year, in essence, it's telling us we would end up with a surplus of $8,000 at the end of the year. The next year we talked about 150, we'd have a surplus of 10,000. And again, these are assumptions. These are based on inflation only going up 3%, insurance only going up 7%, your property value is going up 2%. We still get $325. We had to put those assumptions in. So this kind of plays out that shows at the end of fiscal year 28-29, we'd have a $14,000 surplus. And the mill rates are captured on about 827 this year, 889, 921, 954, and 989. So what happens if we did nothing? Well, we're going to be in trouble financially if we do nothing. We have a bus contract. I would have to go back and renegotiate bus contracts because we might need to drop a route to try to save some money. But dropping a route means longer bus ride times. We may have to look at our academic offerings. But, you know, we have a lot of wonderful things that happen in here, and we do it with a lot of smoke and mirrors, not a shoestring budget. We have one of the best media programs in the state of Wisconsin, and it started with a couple $100 that somebody got on a grant, and then it was another grant, and then it started to become self-funding because of the work that these kids are doing with our teachers.
And it's amazing. The media program is amazing. These kids are getting opportunities to do game production at a high school level, and I hope when they go up to their colleges, they're the ones projecting on the jumbotrons in the Kohl Center and all these other big cities. It's great.
Absolutely. You know, so those might be examples of things we might not be able to do. Because I won't
That we
have,
should be able to do if it's self-funded,
right,
right?
right?
Okay.
We might have to reduce co-curriculars that we offer because everything comes with a cost. Whether it's a membership fee, a staffing requirement, you know. To Joni's point, every year when I bring to her a retirement, someone's leaving the district, the number one question that I anticipate always coming from Member Heisner is, can we absorb this position? And a couple of years ago, if you remember, we tried that. We had a small group coming through the elementary school, and the numbers played out. I talked to the elementary school principal. We both felt, okay, we can do this. We're not going to replace this retiring staff person. And do you know what grade level every student that moved into the district went into?
Second grade.
That second grade. To the point where we hired a long-term sub for the second semester and hired a full-time teacher to have 3 sections at each level.
Can I ask a question in regards to that, just to better my understanding? So I understand that open enrollment is, you know, you have the deadlines and all the things. So what is it after that third Friday count in September? Then you can just come without open enrollment?
You have to open enroll.
You have to open enroll, but if you got denied, then you can come in
You
September?
could potentially come. We do have limits. The board every year in January has to set the limit. And when it's the limit for that school year. So one of the things, you know, one of our high cost areas is special education. We have had to deny students coming in that want to open enroll in with special education with an IEP if we don't have the staffing.
But what happens if they were denied based on like class number, sizes, all those things? And then does something change after that third September count? Or maybe if the class sizes change between the time that you guys have to make that decision and the time that the students come?
Once that decision's made in January, nothing changes until after the third Friday count. Then if it's if they miss the deadline for filling out the paperwork, we can't take it.
Correct.
But after the third Friday, we
But if
can
they filled
look
it out
at
and they were denied, it can be reassessed after the third Friday. Is that based on
it. Section number, how many
class
students we have
sizes
per
change,
grade, and
somebody
things like
moved
that.
out, somebody whatever, then
Yeah.
all of a sudden they're sure they can come?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
just wanted to understand that.
Yep.
Thank you.
You bet. Less competitive wages. Again, we want to try to recruit the best. We want to try to retain the staff members that we have. And again, this referendum is not asking to add programs. This referendum is asking to maintain the programs that we're providing our students. And I couldn't be more proud of a group of teachers and staff members, our aides that do the work day in and day out with the kids because they're providing wonderful opportunities. Deferred maintenance, we have to use Fund 46 more because I can't put money in a maintenance budget. And then we would spend down our fund balance. If we're not successful in November, I can't cut staff without impacting students. And the first thing that I look for is what's the furthest away from students. What's the furthest away from the experience our students can have. And there is no way to cut ourselves to that $1.3 million. We would have to come back in the spring of the year. We would probably ask for a smaller dollar amount, but then that also means we'd be back sooner because that smaller dollar amount is not going to get us to that 5th year. And we'd be worried about, what's the quality that we can offer? What are we expecting from our school district? What are our taxpayers asking for? So here's kind of where we got to the 1.3. Now you'll see out in that last year, 28, 29, again, when that information was pulled, in this spreadsheet, it was 1.2 million. Earlier when we were looking at it, was 1.3 out of that last year. You see fund balance, the number goes down until it's negative. You see in the 25-26 school year, if we don't pass a referendum and we just continue to use fund balance, we're going to go below the 15% to the point where we're having negative fund balances.
And Mitch, is this projection with no other changes made, right? All else held equal, we're not cutting anything, we're not cutting positions, we're not trimming the fat, we're operating as is.
Correct.
This is where we end up.
Correct.
Okay. Because is this kind of where Dodgeville's at? Like I'm hearing Dodgeville's not gonna be able to make payroll if they don't pass a referendum. Is that? I mean, is that a worry? Is that a concern here? I mean, we don't want that to happen.
It wouldn't be a worry
Okay.
next year. It might mean some sleepless nights.
Yeah.
Maybe a little anxiety involved in there. After that second year, you bet it's, all batten down the hatches, because that's the position we would be in financially without any other assistance financially.
So Mitch, if the referendum failed in November, we would plan on going back in April for maybe the same amount, maybe a lesser amount. That hasn't been decided. But if the April referendum fails, we can't go back in that same calendar year, correct?
There would be no election in that next calendar year after April.
In the fall.
Right.
So
And
the
with
next
two-
possible would be the following April.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have we looked at that? Like, what is the plan for that? If that were to happen? I hope that doesn't happen. I hope it passes. I know I'm asking hard questions, but I want to be educated. But, what happens then? Do you go to the community to raise money like we do for the football field? To say, hey, we're looking for private donations for the school? I'm serious.
Right.
Like, what is
The answer would be, some school districts are having to do this now. Like I talked about, having a line of credit. Some school districts, we use that line of credit waiting for our aid payment. Some school districts are going for that line of credit to make payroll, to run their business. And the plan is to then pay it back over a 10-year period. So they would have to go back. At some point in time, we would have to go back and get a successful referendum. And that dollar amount would keep going higher so that we could pay off that debt.
Jenny, we have levers we could pull that would probably financially stress the staff.
And I don't want that to happen. I mean, that's why I'm asking that. Like, I'm talking to people from other communities and I'm hearing these awful things.
Right.
I'm like, whoa, is this on our radar? Like, at what point are we scared about this? Because I don't want to get to that point.
We're trying to be proactive with this referendum so that we aren't like, this has to pass or bust, right?
That
But
should be mentioned because nobody's here.
Correct.
So I don't know if that means everybody's voting yes, if
Or
they're not
everybody's-
made up their mind. But, I mean, I think somebody would have to know that, Aaron, that like possibly in 2 years, it could be like really very here.
right,
I mean, 4-6 freaking people, it's kind of crazy.
it is.
Agreed.
Regardless that people may have made up their mind, I'm only here for, honestly, for more educational purposes, whatnot. But I think people need to know that, and like you said, circumstances come up, like in 2020, and it could be a whole different ballgame.
Right. Well,
And not that raising an alarm, but I didn't interpret this chart correctly at all.
I didn't either.
I didn't know that in a couple of years, possibly, like you're saying, some positions may need to be tweaked or looked at, or if there is no raise, yada, yada, yada. I mean, do teachers know that? I'm just saying, yes, I know the more information you provide sometimes, and I would just say, I would think you want to be as clear as you could, because if it doesn't pass, and you have to re-explain stuff, and things weren't really explained correctly the first time, people really do not like that.
I think one thing that you haven't touched on, or if I missed it, sorry, I had a family emergency. We have to walk a very fine line as school staff. Did you touch on this at all?
I can't be the yes vote guy,
Oh, no, I'm totally.
and I can't be the no vote guy.
I'm not
Right.
saying that at all.
My job is to provide you information.
But if no one's here, they didn't just hear you say, hey, in
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
But you also have to be, I get it, I totally, I'm not debating that, but I think there's a little bit of, you have to be careful with how much doom and gloom I've seen in other districts that you lay out.
Sure.
Because then if that doesn't happen, or you don't follow through on that, it gets really, again, a trust issue. So, yeah, it's a,
I mean, 1.3 million is is a big dollar amount. I can't go home and write the check for that. But I am comfortable and confident that our ask is pretty small in comparison to a lot of other districts around us, and for the size of district that we have, the number of students and the academic opportunities we provide. And again, I agree. I mean, I had all staff members here. We kind of went through a similar presentation. I didn't have all the nice graphics and things, but I kind of explained to them where we are. I've met with the chamber board and had that conversation with them. I'm going to meet with the Kiwanis and a couple, other groups. And again, all I can do is put this out here, and we will have another public forum when we get a little bit closer to the November vote date, but mail-in ballots are going out now, so I wanted to try to get information out if we can.
So some of you're going to talk about here is that 31 schools in CESA 3, half of them are up here, right?
Yep.
Some of them passed, some of them are going this November. Have we reached out to the schools in CESA 3 that aren't to see what are they doing to bend this up? What are those, I used to work in a bank. We look at peer groups, we look at things and say, okay, what is this bank doing? What is this bank doing? How is this bank doing this? How are they doing that? Are we looking at that and talking to other schools to say, hey, how is XYZ school district continuing to operate with these current funds? And maybe we're not because they're not to the level that we're at, but I guess I'm just wanting to know that question is, are we talking to the other school districts to say, hey, what are you doing that you're not going to referendum? Or maybe they just went to referendum or whatever, but I guess that's my question is instead of saying, hey, everybody else is doing it, we're going to do it, that's kind of a warm fuzzy, right? We're trying to get a warm fuzzy here.
Right.
But my question is on the other side of it is, what are the other half of them that aren't going to referendum doing differently than what we're doing? And have we asked those questions?
Platteville.
And I think to be fair, I believe the data Jamie gave us was there are 3 schools in CESA 3 that have not had a referendum. Is it 5 years?
5.
In the last 5 years. So a lot of the schools not on here have already done so.
Right, but who are those 3 schools and what are they doing? And what can we learn from them?
I think they have had that referendum, probably just outside that 5-year window.
Okay.
But yes, we ask all the time.
Yeah, so we work with all 421 schools in the state to some degree, and 146 are going to operating referendum. There's 421 districts in the state, so over 25% are going this fall. If you include last year, the number jumps to over 50% gone in the last 2 years. If you include the 2 prior years, that number is like 85%. And the ones that haven't are slowly but surely realizing that virtually every district has to, and if they're not, they're just not paying attention to the financial picture, and then it's going to be a rude wake-up call in the next year. But there's virtually no way that a district can operate with the way
And I just didn't know that. I mean, we look at this for the last year, and I was just curious as to the last 5 years, whatever, who hasn't, and what can we learn from them?
Yep, and I just worked with 2 districts in the last week that, as we looked at their financials for this current 24-25 school year, realized that they should have gone to referendum, but they've missed the deadline, and so now they're going to have to go in spring.
And to me, this isn't a warm fuzzy. This is a...
To the general public, you have to remember,
No.
to the general public, this feels like everybody else has done it, everybody else is doing it.
Yeah, no.
It feels okay.
Well, no, to me, it feels like we're all singing,
That's how.
right? The whole state's in trouble, right? This should sound an alarm. This should not be a warm fuzzy. This should be like, well, because it's really the answer to the question, well, Mayor Point, why do you want to refer? What are you doing wrong? Well, we're in the same boat because we're all trying the same strategies to save money and keep us from referendum. And to Marquez's point, about the districts that maybe got there too late or maybe weren't paying as close attention to their finances, that's what we want to show the community, that we're not that irresponsible, right? And Courtney's point,
That needs to be a message.
that the opposite is, if we went to referendum a year or two from now and said, listen, if we don't pass it right now, we are losing payroll and we're just going to be hemorrhaging teachers and it's going to be panic mode, people are going to say, well, didn't you see this coming? You know, why didn't you get this money ahead of time? You know, why didn't you make some contingency plans? You know, and so we're in a place where we do see it coming, and you know, we're trying to operate in a sense where we don't want to have any dip in the quality of education year to year. And this is the best strategy we can think of for this time.
And the conversation at the board level has been going on for a year about when is the right time to go to referendum. So again, it hasn't snuck up on us. We've been well aware of it. And again, I think the point I hope to make is that we have made as good of financial decisions as we possibly can to provide the best education we can. And this is where we are, just like a lot of other school districts are in that same boat because the funding levels are the way they are. So one thing a lot of people don't know is if we look at the top line, over the last 5 years, Mineral Point has given up $349,000 to voucher schools, to voucher programs. We see it in the Wisconsin Parent Choice Program or the Racine County Parent Choice Program. So the state says, here you go, here's that revenue. Now we're just taking it to send it to these voucher schools. So this is taxpayer money that basically doesn't even get into my right hand to give to my left hand to give it to somebody else. It just avoids me completely and goes to voucher programs. So, and it's a different amount each year, but 5 years combined, it's $349,000 that's going to voucher programs. As I talked about earlier, special education funding, it was 30 cents. They moved it to 33 cents or 33%. If they move that higher, that gives us more flexibility with our revenue as to what we're doing. Again, $1.2 million transferred from our general fund, Fund 10, to our special education fund, Fund 27.
And Jenny, you asked earlier like how that would affect if your
The
reimbursement
percentage,
increase.
yeah.
I think to Marquette's point, there's a lot of variables like, you know, sometimes we have to hire a new special ed teacher, like right now, because we have a new student that needs that, and that's going to change the budget. But if you just think about it, you know, 33%, if that goes, so we get a third reimbursement, if that goes to half of a $1.2 million special ed budget, you know, you're looking at, you know, an additional, you know, $200,000-300,000 that we don't have to pay out of our general fund for some special ed. And that's basically what our predicted increase in expenses is going to be over the next 3-4 years. So that would make a huge impact in terms of how much we have to increase the levy, you know, for the property taxes. So that would be a huge difference. And I would say just ballpark probably $200,000 if it went from 33% to 50%, at least in the next few years.
And the last one, I'll get on my soapbox here. You've heard there was a historic investment in education, but there's one word that's missing from that. Public education. We got $325 per pupil. Private schools got about 10 times that amount of money per pupil in this last biennium budget. If I'd have gotten that kind of money, we wouldn't be talking about a referendum this year. Maybe another year or 2 years down the road. But had I gotten that kind of funding on a per pupil basis, we wouldn't be not needing that referendum right now. So what are things we've done, Mike, to come back to you? What have we tried to do to rein in some costs? So when CPI keeps going up, expenses keep going up, here's some things that we've done. As I said, the staff contract language talks about funding their salaries at CPI. We have not given CPI. In the last 3 years, that consumer price index number has gone up 6.82%. The school district has only increased salaries 13.16. Did I say 13? 16.
No, you said 6.82.
Sorry, 16.87% is what CPI's gone up. 4.78, 4.12. We gave 3, 6, and 4.12. So we've given 3% less on salary. So we're not keeping up to inflation for our employees. We've used the ESSER money to offset increases. We've made cuts to our technology budgets. We've made cuts to our maintenance budgets. Something our IT people have said, E-rate. So if you want to reach out to your legislators again and tell them to support E-rate, and this is even at the federal level, E-rate offsets our expenses for our computers, for our internet connections. We get reductions in costs for those things. Their services can be run through E-rate. So I'm anticipating about a 60% reimbursement, so about a $70,000 savings. I won't get that in this fiscal year. We'll get it in the next fiscal year. But that will be a $70,000 savings to the district when it comes to that cost. We brought back the food service program. We're anticipating cost savings in that area. You know, first and foremost, we're not going to be paying the management fees and things to the company that we've used in the last few years. As I said, we analyze whether or not we should replace a position or not. Every time we have a position come open through a retirement, through somebody leaving our district to go somewhere else, we analyze that. Is that a position we can survive without? We competitively bid large projects. We reduce costs on our leases, some of our lease agreements. Staff members have had salary freezes. They have step freezes, which means they move down to a new cell in the salary structure based on them being an effective teacher. Sometimes we've had to freeze if they earn their master's degree, they move in another column for a master's degree. We've had to freeze those things, so we haven't paid some of those increases on. And obviously we've done some more things along those same lines. Places we've tried to cut costs. Places we've increased revenue. I talked about my 2 gals in the business office. We used to anticipate revenue for interest on savings accounts at about $2,500 to $3,000 per year. Because of their suggestion for us to pay bills weekly instead of monthly, that has saved us having to get that line of credit. So instead of going to the bank and saying we need to borrow some money, we'll pay you back, and we're paying you interest, we've kept that money in our accounts. We picked up $50,000 worth of interest income in this last fiscal year because of that change, because of these 2 gals. It's incredible what they were able to do. Our open enrollment numbers keep going up. While we don't get fully funded for open enrollment, we get about 2/3, around $8,000 for each student that open enrolls into our district. We talk about our point intermediate kids. They're self-sufficient because they're generating funds through their advertising campaigns. We use Fund 46 for some of our maintenance projects. The Excellence in Education Endowment Fund every year funds teachers' programs that they want to do. You know, hey, I want to be able to do this with my kids. It's going to cost $500. I don't have that in my budget. They go to the Excellence in Education Endowment, write out the grant, they fund it. They can pull these things off and our kids can have those experiences, and that's not costing the district money, it's coming from grants. We had the Summer Kids Club down at the elementary school this year. The Community Foundation was a major, major part of that. We wrote a grant, they awarded the grant, they got that up and running for us to make that a possibility this last year. So then it runs cost neutral. What we're charging our families is offsetting the cost for the food and the supplies and the staffing that we have down there. So we're using groups wherever we can, whenever we can.
Can I add that the Community Foundation also funded the media program 2 years ago?
Yep.
Significantly. So when you get those donation requests in the mail from the Community Foundation, we get the second thought.
And we don't, you know, it's one of those, hey, they got us what we need right now, we don't go back. You know, it's like, you don't want to just try to keep funding the same program over and over and over. You want that money to be able to impact others around the community as well. Some of the things we're very proud of. You look up there, under academically, that second bullet point. Last year's graduating class went out, earned, raised, had donated to them $1.6 million in scholarships. Minimum point students graduating picked up $1.6 million in scholarships. That's incredible. I know one student went off to a school, I believe in Iowa, and basically it's going to be it's such a minimal cost to them because their education is going to be paid for through some of the grants and scholarships that individual earned. We have 7 Herb Cole Fellows on staff. We have 3 nationally board certified staff members on staff. We are involved in co-curriculums, state civics team, state forensics, state music honors, state solo ensemble, the musical Jerry Awards. We have a board member here. We had a child that went through this last year and it spoke very highly of the Jerry Awards. And it's not something just hey, thanks for showing up, you get this award. There's some work that has to go into being able to get some of these awards. Skillfully, Skills USA, we have state and national competition, kids competing state and nationally in FBLA, FFA, Skills USA, 27 certified youth apprenticeships. We are a sources of strength school district, and that's growing. It started out in the middle school, high school. It's growing into the elementary school. We have students that serve in peer mentorship roles, helping students be successful, helping support each other. Athletically, what a year last year. It's kids competing in state cross country and state track. We had state championship basketball team, state championship golf team. We have a state competitor track team. We have students competing at all sorts of levels, academically, athletically. Matthew Ganinin is our poster child of someone who will never earn a middle point diploma because we can't afford to let him graduate. He runs our media program. He runs the graphics board. He does so much for us. He was a National Senate Scholar. 2 people from the state of Wisconsin, a middle point student was one of those, went to Washington, D.C. He also served that role at the state level, where every school, in the district can nominate people, and he hit that as well. He was also part of the national FBLA competition down in Florida. So, we are providing opportunities for our students to show how they exceed and excel. This came from Senator Markland. A couple of weeks ago, he put out something about where have schools in my district increased their costs per pupil from 2019-20 to the 22-23 school year. So it says up there's 48 schools in the 17th district. Middle points increase over those 4 years was the 3rd lowest of all 48 schools. The state average was 20.5% increase in per pupil spending. 20.5% increase in per pupil spending. Middle points came in at 11.5%. The other 2 schools, Pecatonica and Benton, their increases were 6.3 and 5.1 respectively. So we have held the line on our costs to the best of our ability and still try to provide what I consider one of the best educations in this part of the state. Our enrollment numbers are up. The 789 is an affectionate term, butts in seats. 789 students come into our school buildings on a day-to-day basis. Now, our enrollment that we get revenue on is not that number. One of the reasons is some of those kids are open enrolled numbers. We don't get to count those students in our student count that open enrolled in. Our 4-year-old kindergarten kids only count as 60% of a student even though they send 100% of the body into the school. So we get 60% of the state funding for those students. So that our enrollment number on what is called our revenue limit worksheet will be much lower than 789. But compared to the number of students in our building last year to where it is this year, we're up 15 students from last year to this year. Here shows our open enrollment numbers. The blue line is our open enrollment in. The gray line is our open enrollment out. So you look back in the 12-13 school year, we had 35 students open enroll into the district. We were negative when it came to open enrollment. We had more students going out than coming in. You look at this year, we have 105 students who chose to come to Mineral Point. They wanted their kids to be here. Now, we come back to that, you were talking about, the third Friday count in September and this and that. We have not allowed a student with a special needs to come into our district the last several years because we don't have the space available. Part of the reason why school boards can set that limit is so that we don't have to hire additional staff. If students move in, then we don't have a choice. We can't say no. But we can deny open enrollment based on our space availability. Some of our grade levels, early grade level classrooms are closed off. They're too full. We have 22 in each section. In third grade, we will not take any third graders because we just can't afford to take more. We don't have space for more.
And to Jenny's point, these are fluid all the time. So just from when I made that slideshow last week, I just pulled up Skyward now. We're sitting at 799 as of this moment.
So we picked up another 10 students based on that number.
And then 2/3 of the funding
Yeah.
per student.
Yeah, I don't know how many of
How
that.
many is going to economies of scale like that, where we're taking in all these students and only getting 2/3 of the percent of the funding? At what point, or is there a point, maybe there's not, I'm just asking, I'm here for education. Is there a point where we have too many open enrolling, that we're losing money because we can't afford to continue to take them because we're not getting enough funding per pupil to manage what we have within the building?
Part of that comes back to the board being able to limit that number. Where's that cost
Yeah.
benefit come in?
Where is that? Because there has to be, right? There has to be a tipping point in that to where.
If we have to add staff, I'm not, if I get $8,000 per student, I need 10 students to give me one teacher salary benefits. I need
Right.
80,000 to kind of lay that out. So if I've got everybody hired, if I've got everybody employed, fully employed 100%, and I have to hire somebody new because I'm getting 4 students, that's why we set those limits. Those 4 students don't offset that cost. So that's why we look at some of those things. And the
I just didn't know where that
administration,
number was
Right.
of that tipping point, because only 2/3 of the amount of funding, where we're already saying that what we're getting for our in-district students isn't enough. At what point?
Right.
I think open enrollment's great. I think it's great if people want to come here, they move here.
Absolutely.
Our tax base, that helps
Yeah,
the issue of the problem here, but.
I think
Right.
also, right, like,
Didn't know, like,
many of
what
you
that
were around when we did the applied population study for the elementary building. And that was through UW-Madison, and I think they said, like, your resident enrollment is going to be flat or maybe even slightly decline. So I think that's something too that, there's just a lot of what ifs, with,
Predict, I think, over 5 years out.
right. And now we're already, 6 years out from that, so.
I'm really fascinated by Jenny's question, and I'm curious, we, as a board, we should think about how, if we were to determine our variable cost per student,
Yeah.
what is that number? I don't know how, it's not like creating a widget, where you have the variable cost, but I think we should probably, that's a data point that I think it would be worth having.
Well, and you
If don't
also,
have people moving into the district,
Yeah.
then it's an actual net loss.
correct.
and you think about the things our community values in small class sizes, especially at early grades, is one of those, so,
Yeah.
you
I guess I just look at that to say, okay, here's our funding per student, it's 10,000, whatever that number is. If we're only getting $70,000 per open enrolled student, what is our average cost then? Our average funding per student if we spread it over everything, and where is that number? That's got to be a metric that we need to be looking at to say, okay, open enrollment is great, but to what.
Right, because, I mean, it's
Maybe I'm all wrong, I'm just challenging you to think, to look at things in just in a different way, because.
No, I think I'm not going to argue that, but, it's going to cost the same amount to run a certain program too, right? Whether there's, so that's another thing. And I can tell you from other districts, this slide's on here, and I think a couple of them are just our enrollment. We're in a much different position. If you go to a neighboring school district, you're going to hear a declining enrollment story, and that's not ours. So I think if it were, we would be asking probably for a larger dollar amount. So I think, and Mitch can, tag on to that too, but I think that's part of the reason for it.
I just look at that as the deep dive of, okay, those students are enrolling out, but you're still getting a third of the money. Where does that put you financially? I guess I just wonder what has been looked at in that regard.
And I would say the easiest, quickest answer is if we get to the point where we have to add another staff person,
Then the answer is no.
then that's where it's not cost effective anymore. We've lost the value we're getting. To Joelle's point, if I'm running a class and I've got 20 students in front of me, putting one more student in here brings $8,000 into the district and doesn't cost me any more for the one student. But if it costs me having to buy another teacher.
But it does cost more. It costs more in your Chromebook, and it costs more in your water usage, and it costs more for all the things, right?
But from a staffing level, it doesn't cost more. And
From a staffing level, it doesn't, but from an overall budget standpoint, it does.
Right. And the
So what it does
and the biggest cost
is staffing.
is staff.
I mean, the math would never wash out to the degree that it would hit a tipping point in staffing. I think one of the things we do is look at each grade level, literally like every grade level, what's the capacity right now for that grade level? What would be the tipping point where we would have to add staff, fill in the difference? So for every single grade level, because if we just applied a formula, right, like if we created a formula of the tipping point, it wouldn't be able to account for the conditions in that class. Like, well, there are already 10 special ed students who need one-to-one or something like that, would end up getting lost in that formula. But I think you're right, we need to pay attention to it.
I think the take home is that we hem and haw about that exact issue every January when the state requires us to set limits every year. And the administration comes to us and says, we think we can take X amount per grade, open enroll every year. And then we kind of hem and haw those numbers and talk about all the factors, including the one you talked about, and I think the fact that we feel we see every district having declining enrollment, and we feel like every forecast of birth rates and all that, we feel like we have to take every student we can get within reason, right? And so there's that pushing back as well. And, we just hope that, for every open enrolled kid that wants to come here, their family finds a home here at some point, right? And that's the long-term strategy. It's like, if we get 2/3 of a reimbursement from a kid for a little while, then they eventually move here and then we get full
So
reimbursement.
do we have any metrics on that of families who have open enrolled and then actually became residents? Do we have any metrics on that to see what is our success rate in getting them in the district? Over the last 10 years, if we go back 10 years, look at the students that open enrolled in, how many,
Yeah,
do we know what that is then? Like,
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
It's not that big of a number, just because.
so it's not as big a number as what we would like.
That's right. We always can use more housing.
Yeah. Blame Mike.
Sure, for families.
Point the
But
finger
not
at
blame
me.
Mike, but this guy knows more than anybody that
Yeah.
what the market's like.
And a lot of years,
I mean, we can hope and hope and hope that that happens,
Right,
but what are we doing as a district and a community to try to make that come to fruition?
But that's the brutal fact, that the tax base does not increase. Our only hope is open enrollment.
That's right.
So
So,
our
I
hope
mean,
is an open enrollment if us as a community can do things to increase our tax base.
But that's what the school can.
Right, that's what the school can control,
I
correct?
don't get control over, should we have another business park? I don't get control over,
No.
we should have a subdivision in this area. Because I do get people that call me, I haven't had anybody call me this year, but it's like, hey, we're open enrolling. I really wish, I want to move into your community. I want to move into your district. There's nothing that available, or there's nothing that I can afford, so that they run up against that issue. This last winter, we approved somebody detaching their property from one school district and attaching it to our school district. You know, that was wonderful for us. And they have open enrolled here and now no longer open enrolled because they are now our students living in our district.
And for every kid who open enrolls out of Interpoint, we know why.
We know, so do we ask, so and again, just from a like problem solving standpoint, are we serving those families that are open enrolling in saying, is your intent to move here? Like, is that a goal? Is that I mean, are we asking those questions?
As far as I know, you know, when they apply.
No, we're not. We're not asking those questions of, is that the goal for your family to get into the district?
Correct.
Okay.
That we are not asking that question. There's a standard form that families fill out that, you know, indicate this is the reason why I want to open enroll in, but nowhere on there does it ask, is your
Us as a
intention?
district targeting those open enrollment families saying,
Right.
is that a goal? What are the barriers to you doing that?
And I, you know.
I guess I assume that because I hear a lot of like, this family's coming and they would love to move here, but they can't. You know, I hear a lot of those anecdotally, but that's helpful to know that it's not a standard
Then it's
question.
not a standard being asked.
Yeah.
If it's, are they coming for academics? Are they coming for sports? Are they coming for special education? What are they coming for? And is their goal to move here, or is their goal to just put one kid here, or 2 or 4 kids here, or what, you know, whatever? I think it would just help us make better decisions.
We could definitely probably ask that after the process is done, because if we put it on the form and the enrollment, it could look like we didn't pick you, or, you know, we don't.
Oh, for sure. I'm just saying, yeah, exactly. Once they're in, like, once you're in, you're in. Yeah.
We do hear things like, you know, my kid's best friend lives here now, so they want to come here. My kid wasn't, you know, my child wasn't
We're struggling
treated-
socially in the
right,
school.
yeah.
We want to come here. Yeah,
a fresh
for sure.
start. We want, you know, you have a media program, you have, you know, an ag program, you have,
There's different extra ways to get those dollars if a family says, yeah, hey, we want to move into the district, but we don't know, you know, where to start. And maybe we put them in contact with Mike or whoever.
right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. And finally here at the end, the beauty is, Joelle saw this a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, Ron Dunbar's historical page, which is fantastic.
So this was printed in the Mineral Point Tribune back in 1922. I won't read it all, but if you look at good equipment, strong faculty, high standards, it says the Mineral Point High School is fully accredited by the North Central Association of Colleges and Secondary Schools, so graduates may enter colleges without examination. This was an advertisement in the paper back in 1922 about the Mineral Point School District. Good equipment, strong faculty, high standards. I think you could say that about us right now. We have good equipment, good facilities. We have excellent faculty. We set high standards. We have students that graduate here and go to Ivy League schools. I can remember years ago, the comment was, how come none of our students ever go to an Ivy League school? And no sooner was that comment made than somebody said, does my brother graduating from Harvard Medical School count as an Ivy League school? We want, like I said, open doors. I want our students to be able to go places that they want to go. We've had students leave here, go to the Wharton College of Business, the #1 business school in the country. One of our graduates is there. As a matter of fact, he's also now the class president of the freshman class this year at the university, one of our students. One of our students went to University of South Carolina in Columbia to one of the top international business schools. We have students that have gone to Penn. We have students, Cornell, thank you. Ella James just graduated and went to Cornell, another Ivy League school. We have kids that get into Madison. We have kids that have gone to Southwest Tech.
And they bank when they're done.
Exactly. And better yet, the thing that I'm most proud of are the graduates that I see working for a business, getting that journeymanship, getting that and making money without having to spend it, that are working and living here in Mineral Point. Those are the open doors that we want to continue to have, opportunities available for our kids. So if you have questions, email, call, website, the QR code. I appreciate you guys coming out and sticking with me for an hour and 40 minutes. I'm glad I could answer questions. If you have more, please don't hesitate. And please, Don't be afraid to talk to people. Again, let them vote with facts. Let them know this information. I'll be meeting with smaller groups, and we'll do another public forum sometime in October. But thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.